Identification of elements of green infrastructure. Key concepts. The strategic diagnosis has allowed us to identify natural and semi-natural areas of high quality in terms of biodiversity and ecosystem services, detect challenges and problems, and know the population's demands. With this information, we can define the specific challenges and objectives of the local green infrastructure strategy. But before that, we need to make a practical classification of the elements to be acted upon in the territory. In the Galicia North Portugal Euro region, we can see different scenarios in the local entities. There are municipalities whose situation means they only need to work on a rural scale, whereas others have to include their urban areas to adapt the strategy to their particularities. The local green infrastructure elements fall into the following functional categories. Core areas. Natural areas of great ecological interest. These are essential in conserving biodiversity and natural heritage in the area and which act as epicenters for conservation. Ecological corridors. Territorial strips that connect core areas to foster ecological and environmental connectivity. Buffer areas. Spaces surrounding the core areas and corridors to protect them from negative impacts that human activity nearby may cause. Multifunctional areas, spaces that are also relevant in providing ecosystem services. Other green infrastructure elements. These are intended to minimize the consequences of big infrastructures on biodiversity and ecological connectivity. On the urban scale, urban elements can be included that are relevant to conserve or improve biodiversity or to provide services to society in any of the aforementioned categories. At this point, to classify the spaces identified as green elements or components of green infrastructure, we must take into account what we understand by core areas. Natural spaces with greater biodiversity, as well as with endemic species, habitats of species that are threatened or in danger of extinction like autochthonous woods, watercourses that conserve rocky vegetation, wetlands, bogs, or natural meadows. These will be the main elements in the green infrastructure. Ecological corridors shall be identified as spaces that connect core areas such as riverways with rocky vegetation, mountain chains, cattle paths and canals, living hedges, dry stone walls, copses and agricultural areas that provide shelter for flora and fauna. For the buffer areas, we shall include components like restricted riverside areas, biosphere reserve buffer areas, protected heritage and landscape areas, and more. The multifunctional areas shall be made up of semi-natural areas with sustainable management for the use of the land. This includes forest areas regulated or managed with a view to sustainability. And there are more elements of green infrastructure like passages and tunnels for fauna, fish ladders, and wildlife crossings. Green infrastructure elements will also be identified in urban environs, such as parks, historical parks, allotments, paths or greenways, recreational areas, green roofing or cladding, or else areas of opportunity for improving how the ecological network works. These elements that make up the green infrastructure will be classified according to their state of conservation, which will determine the different management policies to be used with them. In this vein, we must distinguish conservation areas, that is, areas with ecological functions that are essential to ensure biodiversity and human well-being. Restoration areas. Restoration areas have significant ecological functions, but whose capacity can be improved. Taking into account these pointers and the information on local green infrastructure elements, different levels of priority and specific actions will be drawn up in order to increase the entire network's ecological and social resilience. To sum up, all of the elements in the local green infrastructure must be identified, delimited, and classified according to their function and state of conservation. By having an organized network, we will be able to make long-term plans and carry out the necessary recovery and restoration work to improve the areas that need it, thus increasing the resilience of the green infrastructure on the whole.